meeting. Welcome everyone to the extraordinary meeting for the Grey District Council long-term plan for Thursday the 4th of June 2021. I'll now reopen the meeting at 1 o'clock. Welcome to you all here today and to those that we may adjourn at some time throughout the meeting for staff to rewrite resolutions and make decisions, just to give them some time. If we're not complete by 3 p.m. today, we're going to be adjourning to catch up with loose ends and Mark Davies. We're hoping that we can include all council in this. So we also have a tenders meeting at 4 o'clock this afternoon, so if we're not finished by then, we may have to adjourn. So apologies for today. Hi, Jolene, how are you doing? Apologies for today. We have one from Kaipaka-Kiri Tumahai. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder, please? Second. Councillor Heddick, thank you. Councillor Heddick. Turning to page 17, the first of our key issues. Issue 1, extension of curbside refuse and recycling collection. We are going to be moving, as I said, that we are going to be moving the report they received first. So I'll move that. Can I have a second, please?
Second that.
Councillor McDonald. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Motion carried. Thank you to the submitters that contributed to this issue. I do think that it will be maybe one of the easier ones of the day, looking at the numbers and the benefits it has to our community and its future. The areas that this initiative have been rolled out to, initially some were sceptical, but with the feedback that we have had, many of them have been converted. That is worth the extra cost. But we also need to discuss the Moana and Te Panga area as we debate this issue. So is there any discussion or comments or questions around this?
Well, we'll just read the motion first.
No, we are removing the report. We're removing the report and seconding it, and then we're going to debate it, and we're going to do motions because the motions are going to change. Councillor Becker.
Just at one point, with Moana Te Kinga, I'd like to see it be implemented in year 3, which coincides with the end of our lease on the existing coming to an end at the same time.
Yeah, I understand that. Through you, Madam Mayor, we probably would need to start the process a little bit earlier than
the lease finishing, so that we have something in place. Yes, so it coincides as a workable option.
So I think we'd like to add that. Councillor Morris.
I was going to raise the same issue as yours. What's our plan around Moana Te Kinga? Are we going to bring it in, and when would we bring it in? So you're suggesting we need to start the process earlier.
Yeah, mainly because of the finishing of the existing services. We want to make sure that they cross over rather than we have one finishes and then we don't have anything for a wee while, depending on the rollout of the new service.
We've just renewed that lease, so it'd be 2 years at least.
How long do we renew the lease for?
Short term, 2 to 3 years. Yep. So what's been proposed sounds logical to give a phase-in period, if I could say that.
So that would, I should say that would work.
And the comment I just wanted to make was that I think it's like Councillor Becker said, that we actually do commence recycling up there prior to that lease being finished, so that was the main thing. And if it's got to be implemented earlier, that's good. I know a lot of the submitters have spoke and said that they thought there was a problem on the side of the road with steep driveways, with our vehicles travelling past at speed, but I think it's imperative that we actually do carry on with the recycling, because the other benefit, which we've talked about, is that it extends the life of our dump or the refuge site, and it costs a lot of money as a council to actually, every new cell we put in costs a heck of a lot of money. So the amount of recycling and the stuff we can keep out of that extends the time period. We have to expend a lot of money on that. And the other thing is, I know with there was keeping out of Moana and that, but if you look at Punakaiki, it's much the same out there. The Bulla District Council have the recycling and all those bins out there, and that's the same thing. It's a town that has very few residents, a lot of holiday people, but it seems to function out there, and it's just part of the deal. So we carry on.
We didn't have a lot of feedback, did we, from the Moana and King community on this, did we? I just mentioned it to some of the people out there that do some social media, but has anyone had much feedback?
Yeah, there was one submission that supported it.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
not too much feedback.
Can I ask a question? This is directed to Catherine, because there will be a rates impact, I guess, on this in year 3 that we haven't accounted for bringing in new service from year 2 down. For Te Kinga and Moana.
Sorry.
$70.
Yes.
We sorry now, I'm just not sure. Budget was just for the expansion account.
Yeah, it didn't include, because through the chair and CEO, you have a separate contractor operating for Moana and Te Kinga area. But that's potentially going to change in the short term as well. So
I don't actually think we have the information to know what the rates will be.
So I guess as an estimate, what we need to understand is how many people are affected. So if we know that, then we can multiply that by the $70 roughly that it's going to cost, and that will be the rates requirement to provide the service. Now, that will possibly tip us over the financial strategy of 6% in year 2.
Yeah.
So we would have to do some work around how that might fit into the budget.
Through the chair, will that reduce, is that a targeted rate for that current resource centre there?
So they pay a targeted rate for the collection. The resource centre is
Yep.
no charge for recycling, and they pay a fee at the gate. So
It's not a targeted rate for that area of the lease to cover the lease?
No.
There'll be a saving on the lease.
There will be a saving on the lease, but
that's what will be included.
if we've got, I don't know how many people if there's 100 residences there at 70, that's $7,000 extra we've got to add. If it's 500, then that's 35,000 we've got to add. Now I'm not sure that the lease will cover that, and it may be that we can put that in if the numbers are not too significant and make savings elsewhere to maybe the waste levy for argument's sake that would come down because we are recycling more.
Will the contractor charge more to go all the way up to the line?
The contractor, we haven't discussed the routes yet, but there will be a cost. Obviously, there's a mileage cost for this one. There won't be so much of a cost in terms of the pieces of equipment they have to buy because they've already bought the equipment for doing whatever they need to do. There'll be a cost for bins because we haven't factored that into the price yet because we haven't done that. There'll be a marginal cost for the contractor to go out there and collect those bins.
Will that be added on to the rate base?
It may increase it slightly, but I think that we possibly could make savings elsewhere to that equivalent, I guess, depending on the size of the quantum that we've got. So I guess if we wanted to know that now, we probably need to take a little break while we worked out how many people are infected. Could we get that today now?
Just
trying to
well,
figure it.
just through the chair, we can't discuss the nature, the lease, can't arrange the lease, that's a commercially sensitive.
Yeah, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the extra costs. How many people we're talking about roughly, and what the extra cost for those people will be.
Would that timing you're talking about tie in with the how we were looking at Bulla, the regional reconciliation? That was about 2024, wasn't it? So that would tie in nicely with that as far as, I mean, it wouldn't.
What was their original reason not including?
Because of the nature, the holiday home in nature, and there would be the thought that potentially they would, people are in and out depending on the time of the week, might not coincide with the bin collection. But having said that, other towns who are of a similar nature, such as Tekapā, Twizel, have that and manage it.
Just as I understand, some parts of Christchurch, you can put a sticker, they can pay a little extra. They won't actually put it back inside your property for you. It's got that sticker on the thing.
Just to throw a spanner in the works too, we've budgeted also to put a recycling sort of centre up in Moana. And I know we're looking for an alternative site after the public were not happy about the present site there. Is that going to be redundant? Would that be considered to be relocated somewhere else?
We have made a call that it's going to be too expensive and acrimonious to put it in, so we have pulled it out and we will put recycling services somewhere else. And Penny is working on that now.
Councillor Beck, would you like to adjourn to give that information, to make a decision, or to introduce a motion
I've got to introduce the motion with that.
without the?
Just find the details later.
I guess what they're asking for us to do is bring it in and we'll have to massage the budget in some way too, which I think a later item will help.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Or year two, if it needs more work in year three?
Need to come in like this, I think a year earlier, like year two.
I think at least starting the process to get it, there'll be purchase of bins, etc. It may happen later on in year two, so it's closer to the year three, but I think it's probably prudent to run it through year two.
And what year is that? Because Moana's on a separate collection contract.
Yes,
We've only just renewed it.
it's about to go out again now. The current contract has been doing it for over 20 years, as signalled. He wants to withdraw, so it's creating a situation where we need to re-tender.
So that contractor lives locally up there.
Through the chair and CEO, yes, that contractor has lived locally in the area and collected from both Moana and Te Kinga. Yep.
And how often is that service provided? Weekly?
Yes.
Yeah.
I just say, so through the chair, that could potentially be just extended, that contract for the period until the new, I don't know, it's management sort of thing anyway.
Councillor Moore, can we add that to this, the suggested recommendation?
Or do we need to change it? I mean, number 3 reads, council proceed with the extension of the curbside refuse and recycling area to include those properties currently on the bag collection service. So that covers it really.
Including Moana and Te Kinga?
But they're already on our bag collection service of some form.
But in the original documents, it was stated separately.
And then including Moana.
So the recommendation is from councillor.
Sorry.
Is there more comments?
But just do they currently have a bag collection service? They do.
Yes, yeah.
Sure.
Okay, so the recommendation is from councillor Moore on page 20.
So I don't need to do the report we received, we've already done that.
Done that.
Okay, so moving to the suggested recommendation, getting it 2. Council proceeds with the extension of the curbside refuse and recycling scheme collection area to include these properties currently on a bag collection, including Moana and Te Kinga. And 3, this is to come into effect from year 2 of the long-term plan, i.e. from the 1st of July 2022.
My second place, councillor Becker. All those in favour, hand up.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Motion carried. It's tougher from here. Key issue 2, library. I'll move that we receive the report. Can I have a second, please?
I'll second that, Your Worship.
Councillor Haddon, thank you. This has certainly been a difficult one, and the submissions that we have received aren't a vote, but there were some submissions received that there was little research around or clarifications to correct information, and there were a lot of people that assumed because it was on freehold land, including the BPA, that it was out of the CBD, which is a little bit of a shame that was not a little bit more research done to some of those submissions, and taking into the account that libraries aren't just about books today and the technology requirements that they actually require. I also believe that there was a knee-jerk reaction from the discussions at Runanga, which is quite certainly understandable. The fact that the library is not fit for purpose now, that it is not proposed until year 5, and the technology is moving at such a pace, in 5 years, where will technology be, and the future of the core services that council are providing and planning. By planning for a new facility in our long-term plan, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to cost this amount, but it sets aside funding for opportunities if they arise, such as PGF or shovel-ready projects, and concepts that we've had to put on the table very fast. And I would also hope the likes of GWC may be able to assist in some kind of context with funding for a multi-generational asset to our community. So I'll open it up to the table now. Councillor McBride.
Interesting subject, and one that I've been in the bus, off the bus, back in the bus, with half the bus. It's just one of those things. I ended up having some really good conversations this morning with, first of all, Mochuaka up there, one of the councillors, because that was getting branded that, hey, we could do this for half the amount. After an in-depth discussion with her, she wasn't very happy with what they've got. She said it's more like a warehouse. It needed more money than what's been bantered in the media. They've had to actually do an extension where they've had to borrow external funding, but call that a community area, so they could get some more money. They had to change their plans multiple times because of things that they had wrong in it. She then put me on to Picton, who her along with Mr. Ogilvie, another councillor up there, were wanting to mirror that type of library, but they got what they got, so ended up ringing the manager there, who was extremely passionate, like our librarian is here. They said that the change in their community is massive. They now have social groups using the breakout rooms and activities area. Long's gone the day of just books. It's a meeting place and a place to bring community together. She also said that the town seems to have gone ahead because of this development. And she then put me on to a councillor in the Blenheim area, because they're about to start their new build. So he had all the figures on it. He said that Picton was around the $6 million mark and 1.2 of land. And that it's working extremely successful. Now, he was a councillor that's been around since 2010, and at first he was objecting even doing it. He said this is ludicrous, everyone's on their tablets and ebooks, and there'll be no such thing. Since time progressed and they passed the motion, he was then one of the driving forces of it, and he said to think that I was so negative on something. He said before he even got home the night of that meeting, he said there was hate mail, voicemails, everything from the pro-library people. And when the development started and he got behind it, and of course you had the against library people. So he said there's no winning in the situation, but he said what it's done to the town is immense. And he said he doesn't believe there'd be anyone in Picton that's a resident there that's not happy with what they've got, which then brought it on to Blenheim. And they are getting underway with a $20 million library plan. And the same thing, they've seen the success of the smaller town and they want to drive that into Blenheim as well. And there's absolutely no turning back. So after those conversations, cutting this budget in half for me is now out. I mean, I was like hell, hearing those submissions yesterday, there was a lot of people that didn't want it, but some of those speakers were extremely passionate. And I think if we don't do this, then we're going to continue going backwards. Our town is looking derelict. It looks, dare I say it, bloody disgusting. And something like this might actually get other businesses interested to invest and build around and actually start bringing it back up. It's going to take time, but I think we can do it. And if we don't, we sit on our hands and then put it off, it's just going to cost us millions more if we do in the future.
Thank you, Patrick. That's good. I talked to the Tasmanian this morning as well, and he said on top of that 5 million, they have applied for a lot of other funding from the RADA Foundation and other funding options to actually get it fitted out and to do all the other work on it. So there was, you know, some quite good comments there, and it would create employment for a new build, and we've got kids growing up in this town that need a future and it needs some progress, but there's many more comments. Sorry, was first, he was waving.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, I believe we have a responsibility to actually budget for the long term for a new library. And as one of the submitters or several submitters said, that it could be extended for the archives, sort of our local archives. So I think that's really important. We did have a study done some years ago, the Library and Museum strategy, and that identified then that there was a need. I think we've got a responsibility to provide this for our people. As long as it's in the CBD, I'd be happy, you know, and I know we've signalled that we prefer to be on freehold land, but if it was, if in that period that at least the Marfuran Corporation were prepared to deal with the sort of council and find some suitable land that's on suitable terms, I would have no problem with that either. I sort of, when I looked at all the submissions, I was like Councillor McBride, I was sort of thinking maybe I'm not reading this right. But then when I actually looked into it, there was only 62 people out of our whole community that were against it. And when you actually break it down, a lot of those people were from Rananga, and I think it could have been a knee-jerk reaction against the council's proposal to perhaps close the community centre out there and also their library. And I think it could have been, you know, reaction, they were sort of thinking against it. And we had some really good submitters yesterday that sort of pointed out the benefits to the community of having a new library. So I think it's a really worthy cause. If you look at the bookshops and the likes, people are still flocking in to buy new books. There's new books, and I think there'll be I know technology could change everything, but a lot of people are getting quite isolated from communicating by being stuck on their iPhones and social media. And I think it's a good thing if we've got a community hub, and the library would be part of that. So I think we've got a responsibility as councillors to plan for the future. I mean, you only have to look at our recreation centre and our swimming complex, that whole thing. We're making better facilities for the town, and it would be a cornerstone project for the redevelopment of the centre of Greymouth for the CBD. So that's my...
Thank you, Councillor Nixon.
I'm totally for the library, and after a visit to the Canterbury Library for a conference recently, I couldn't believe what a great community area it was. And regardless of the books and things, there was a lot of electronic things there on the wall, other things, and everyone was using them. The place was full, had a coffee shop in it. I couldn't believe it. It was in the middle of the day. There was no one on the street. So it was really a hub, you know. It's great.
And that's what libraries are always meant to be about, quiet spaces. When we were there the other day, they had big screens and kids were dancing and following the movements, and it was loud. It was, you know, but it was still a hub, and we may never get what Christchurch have, but we could try to create something.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to support the library too, but I'd be disappointed if we just targeted that 14 million. If we can achieve a facility that'll do the job at a lesser amount, I'd like to see that looked at extensively.
I've visited the Picton Library. It's a stunning building, and one of the key things about it is they've reflected the town in it as well, because it's a marine kind of like centre. The use of timbers and things on the outside and the way they slope them and things like that actually reflects something of the community in which they live. And so I think it'd be worth thinking about that as part of what we do. Go for what I support this.
Any more comments, Councillor Hayes?
Yeah, excuse me. I tend to agree with what everybody's been saying, especially Councillor Haddock hit the nail right on the head. I think we have a responsibility to be proactive and not not sit in our hands on this matter. I know a lot of people voted against the new library, those 62, and as Peter said, that a lot of them are from possibly knee-jerking reaction from us closing the Runanga one or trying to propose to close the Runanga one. So they dug their toes in and said, well, why should you get a new one? Which I can understand. If I lived out there, I might feel the same. So I think we do have a responsibility. I do note that there's some of the submissions pointed out that we will be providing meeting rooms and stuff like that, which may take business away from smaller church groups that are hiring out their community rooms, which we need to be mindful of. We don't need to be in competition to those groups. So we need to factor that in.
I think as somewhat, even Ms. Tracy yesterday, that there are people wanting meetings at the library and they are having them, which is tying up other facilities and so forth. And people do approach us here at council to use the chambers and to use other rooms as well. I think some of those are quite used, and from those submissions yesterday, our staff have been talking to some of those groups that we can retain something at Runanga to rotate books if we have another space or to do something. So those discussions are also being had.
I think another thing needs to be clarified. A lot of the people really thought that we're going to start building it next year. They didn't realise it was in the long-term plan to do, and that was the opposition. When they found that out, they were quite happy that we were right.
And we still have another long-term planning process to go through. And, you know, we certainly need to reiterate that it's going to be in the CBD and, you know, the future, as we said, of the town and councillor.
Yeah, I agree with all the other councillors. And two things I picked up out of our submitters yesterday was one, the need for an archival research facility, and the clarification that a museum isn't exactly the museum that I was thinking it was. So that would be a stipulation I think we should look closely at. And the fact that libraries will always be a library because, like another submitter said, they are a repository for history, you know, be it local or national or even international, but it's a legitimate repository, unlike Facebook and the internet. So, like everyone else has said, you know, we have a duty to make sure that that's extended, and the current one is not fit for purpose.
And that's very big ancestral research and things at the moment, and a lot of people are like really getting interested in that, councillor.
I really like what Pete said about Councillor Haddock, sorry, about the Mawhera. Like if we could actually add that into this recommendation, hey, we might be able to work in with them in some way, open some discussions, and if the space is right, it could actually be a good relationship builder.
So hang on.
Sorry.
Just following on from that, Mawhera aren't the only landholders in the area. You know, there's the likes of DWC that may or may not be willing to lease land to us as well. So there are a number of landholders there that we could enter into agreements with.
And there has been, you know, I have had one of the small chat with someone from Mawhera, and they, you know, they're discussing it amongst themselves too, so they're quite willing. I don't know if we need to add it, but, you know, I think there's certain will to work together and to see what we can do. And of course, you know, they're going through that process as well of where their land's going to be in the next 5-7 years.
Just to signal that the current library would make a fantastic museum space. If we were to build our new library, building right in the centre of town, so it's big enough, because I must admit I've been into the new one and I love what they've done, but it's so small, you know. Yeah.
Any more comments?
I was just going to raise a point of clarification that Councillor Becker brought up in terms of the price. The price that we have in here is based 7 years out, so it's based on information we received through the library study, and then we've obviously had to inflate it over the 7 years. So I would expect that through the process of tendering, etc., the price would come down.
Yeah, it's not a target, but like as Councillor Haddock alluded to, the option is to go on Mawhera land, that reduces the cost of land purchase.
Yeah.
So that significantly come down.
Yeah, and just to add to that, the people who presented the study actually did the costings it was an estimate. It wasn't the council staff who's done that, so they've gone and had a quantity surveyor run his eye over it. So certainly understand it's not a target, but it's a number that has 7 years worth of inflation on it as well.
Just if I could add one more comment, Your Worship, to the recommendation or suggested recommendation actually does identify that quite clearly to say the planning staff be asked to begin the planning process by identifying possible land. So it doesn't actually have to say it's on freehold. So I think you look at all options, and we have time on our side to actually talk to Mawhera and look at all opportunities with it. So it's we've got time, and so that's a good thing with it.
It doesn't say freehold land, but if we just added maybe there in the CBD, that fourth one.
I'm sure I read somewhere, I see that, what you're saying there, but wasn't that part of the, yeah, that it must be on freehold land?
Comment on that. So that's the boundary set out in our CBD development plan.
Yes.
Within that boundary. So would that take us out of the DWC piece of land?
Yes, it would.
Outside.
Well, we haven't got that in there either. So if we just said the CBD as such, surely we're still sitting within the CBD if that was the case.
Unless you just leave the recommendation as it is, because it then presents council, if council decide today to actually go with the concept of the new library, that's actually letting staff come back to us with opportunities, and then council can decide whether they want to go to the peripheral area of the CBD or stick within that area in the future. So that's what I'll see.
Okay, well, any more comments, or shall we get Councillor McBride to go with the recommendation?
Yep, so 1, council thanks the submitters for their submission. 2, council approves the building of a new library to start from year 5. 3, staff be asked to begin the planning process by identifying possible land. And 4, staff to obtain quotes for inclusion in the 2024 long-term plan.
All those in favour? Oh, sorry, second. Thank you, Councillor Hannah. All those in favour, just please raise your hands so we can get it clear. Yeah.
Thought that was going to be a biggie.
Motion carries.
Well done.
Yeah, they're early days, but right. Moving on to key issue 3, delivery of Spring Creek pool service. I will move that the report be received. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Green. Okay, so this is a very controversial topic, but we need to bring it to the table because of the lack of usage, as we all knew, and we need to make, to make the community aware of this. So we're having 8 consecutive days over the summer period when no one was using it, and it was manned by 2 staff. There's no doubt though that it's a great facility, and the people of Runanga have put such a lot of work into it in their community, and it is a credit to them. And they come together to do it, and I believe that, as a community they can again. There was also some very good feedback from submitters, such on like the hours issue and how people were a bit confused about hours or longer hours, advertising and ways to make it more known as well from the main road. Again, I thank the Runanga community for their feedback and attending the drop-in centres with the councillors and the people that have been in contact and met with us even since with positive ideas and suggestions for the future on how we can work together. There have been a few very loud voices through the media that I might add have never turned up to any meetings or drop-ins or engaged on how we can improve or keep this service and complex running. We have had some very good news and progress on the future of the Spring Creek pool with a very kind offer of sponsorship, which we could not reveal the person as of yet, but the donor has offered over a 5-year period $200,000 to keep the pool running. And council have committed that we will be able to run it throughout the next season as well, because we're getting quite late in the piece. So a massive thank you to this amazing offer. And council have also floated the idea with a substantial community group to also work with us on the pool. And we do not know the outcome of this at this stage, so we still need to work on this. There is also another option that we have been discussing of maybe forming a trust that council could put the pool into and the donor could contribute, council could contribute the 30,000, then we've got the 90,000 that we could put into that trust. And the trust being formed of maybe a mayor and a councillor, or 2 councillors and 3 members of the community, which would also help that group and council facilitate to help with funding and applying for funding on that group. So I'll open up the floor now to any comments and councillor.
I'd personally rather see it kept open. I mean, if we could get money from a sponsor and a trust formed, that'd be great. They can a bit more community involvement. It'd be a big help for them too. They can organise their own hours and their own everything sort of thing.
It's such a good facility and it's in such good condition. Councillor Peter, sorry.
Yes, I believe we need to keep that pool running. I don't believe that its council should be operating it. And with that generous offer, I believe it's a catalyst for the community actually getting behind this. I believe council should provide some funding along the way, you know, to help it along. But I believe it would be a great chance for the community to become engaged and get together. Quite a few of those submitters were saying that that's what they're lacking in Runanga, is people being involved in the community. And this could be a really good opportunity for people to take ownership. The problem council have is managing it and having enough people, enough staff to be able to manage it. Whereas if it's run by the community, they could have the longer hours that a lot of the submitters actually requested. And I note in there, a lot of people said, submitters said they didn't mind paying a couple extra bucks for the opportunity of using it. So I think it'd be a really good opportunity for council to actually divest of the operation of it and hand it over to the community, but help fund it along the way somewhere. So I believe that's a good idea.
Councillor Green.
Yeah, I think, well, we've been thrown a lifeline. So, you know, as far as I'm concerned, being their councillor, we grab it with open arms. And the idea of a trust, I think, the whole idea of the submissions was to get people together and to bring their point of views and what they had to offer. And so it opened it all up, put it out on the table, and what we've got now is a perfect solution. And I think if we council run it, you know, for the next year, and then that eases, you know, we form this trust, we get it all together and get things down and get the people behind it. I think it's an amazing facility, and I'd hate to see it go. And, you know, I'm just so glad for the opportunity. And, yeah, I just hope the other councillors feel the same, because I think it's enormous to our area.
It's amazing, and I certainly don't agree with the targeted rate option, because I think people of Runanga, I just don't think it's fair, and it seems like we're taking away and giving more. It's a great facility, so we need to find the ways to keep it running.
That's right. And so can I just add, you know, even though I live in the area, I live just slightly out of town, but I, you know, spend a lot of time there because my grandson's there and my daughter. And but I didn't realise actually how bad we are off. You know, you go in blinkers, and when all that came out yesterday, it actually brought it home to me. It's like, well, these people, a lot of them got nothing.
Yeah.
You know, and so I'm really thrilled that somebody, you know, has put their hand up here.
Just following on from Rose, the big thing here, it's negative or positive feedback. It's feedback, and it's got that community rallied up and together, and it's an amazing little spirit. Like, they talk with such passion and energy, and I think Jan yesterday really hit home. She was an outsider, but she's come to the coast and she's residing in Runanga, and wow, what energy she brings. And along with her and Kate, I think forming a trust sounds like a really good idea. Those sorts of people sound like they're going to give Runanga a hell of a good lift. And once again, like, you've got the miners hall that sounds encouraging. Paul was saying yesterday that it's, you know, 2-3 years away, which hell, that whole town's going to change soon. So I think we've got to give it to them.
And the new people moving into the area, you know, and different things happening, and, you know, it was great seeing those people coming out yesterday and getting rolled up.
I mean, we just heard the library, in fact, and just transformed that community, you know, added to the life of the place. And the minute you take things away, they really go back. Often communities, these sense of identity hinges around a few key facilities where the people congregate. I would, you know, to be honest, on reflection and hearing the passion from those people yesterday, very little something. looking at extending the hours, increasing the charges. It's only $1, I think, to go in, so they could easily go up. You know, they have to pay that. But I'm interested to know, where are we at with the school?
Working with the community group to see what they're coming back with.
Right.
So we're just waiting to hear back from that group to see they've got some work to do around it, but to see if that actually can be done because they've got people that they need to discuss things with. Councillor Hay.
Yeah, I agree with what the comments that have been said already, that we all seen and felt and heard the passion from the people, and not only in the submissions, but the submitters yesterday who came and spoke on the behalf of the townspeople of Runanga and the district, Northern Ward. I think Runanga is, Stuart Nimmo mentioned it, is on the cusp of a regeneration. It's with that new people that are moving into the area, that providing the energy. They're making the older, the more permanent residents that have been there a bit longer, a bit more energised as well. And I think we will end up with a vibrant and really, really good feel about Runanga. I'm just disappointed, not disappointed, but it would be marvellous to have had the Runanga Miners Hall open as well, finished and be able to be used. But when that comes on track within the next couple of years, hopefully, that's just going to boost it again. It's going to be another boost.
I think as what Councillor Haddock said before with the option, I agree with the community taking it over. I think the trust idea, like people in the community come and go. And, people, like there's a lot of volunteer fatigue from people that have done it for so many years on so many groups. If the council was to support it as a trust, and we're to implement those councillors on it to keep it running, it will keep it steady, but give that option as well of future proofing.
Just with the decision we make today, like we're going to support it for 12 months, I'm fully behind this as well. But we'll have to be careful, like if we've got no guarantee we're going to form a trust, we're going to work in with a community group, that means we'll have to come back to council in 12 months' time.
I think from the view, if we work with the community group for the outcome, and then if that falls through, maybe we back it up with the trust option.
I was just redrafting a resolution for you.
Just got to be careful what we don't come back again, that's all.
Well, effectively what it will be is that the council will work with the interested community group to take over the operation of the facility. This is just rough terms.
Yeah.
And if the community group aren't interested, then the council will form a trust. Will form a trust, and it will hand the asset over. Either way, it's going to hand the asset over to the community group or the trust. So I'm just trying to put
how we run the region thing, the same.
Exactly.
The same.
Yeah. So that will be, it will be effectively a two-part resolution, because I'm assuming that our preferred option of the two is, because we've already started that discussion with the group, we want to finish that and get it through to the end. And if they are comfortable taking it on, then that's the way we go. If they're not, then we can immediately kick into forming the trust. And the trust, the assets can be handed over at any time, and the trust can take over. It doesn't have to wait for the 12 months. So what I'm saying is, I guess if the interest is there and we can put this to bed within 3 months, then we can put it to bed within 3 months, and it will happen at that time, and the new entity will take over running it.
Land and building.
So I'll just need a little bit of time once you've
Yes,
finished.
and I state that we would add that 90,000 in that resolution as well. Is there any more comments?
Sorry, this year, there are actually some conditions in the legal agreement for you around the money that's in that reserve trust for you. Just looking at it now, but there are conditions and agreement needs to be done before you can spend that money on something else.
Why hasn't this come to light?
No, you're talking about the money that was given to subsidise the.
In the reserve, yeah.
I think what we need to do is make sure that in the agreement, those terms and conditions are passed over to that group, so that reflects what that money is to be used.
It's not an indiscriminate.
That's right, yeah, so we need to make sure that that's covered off.
Councillor Haddock?
Just while you're drafting that up, The Chair, I just sort of noted yesterday too, some of those figures that said how poor or the low decoration that Rananga is, and I was really quite surprised. And I think, by having that trust, and there's a chance for people to get out of the doldrums and have that community-led development, get people engaged, some of those people that are down in community spirits in there. And I know in the past there's probably been, there is a group out there, Rananga Ratepayers Association. I think there's been maybe a bit of disparity, hadn't been well supported by the community, and this could be an opportunity for a new sort of group to help get people in that community together. And you only have to look at Reefton, and as Paul Thomas submitted, how Reefton's got together with the community and actually really, it's a great place up there. There's no reason why Rananga couldn't well be the same. So.
Councillor Hay?
And I think we just need to be grateful and acknowledge that generous sponsorship.
It's amazing. We're really thankful, and when we can release that, we will. And we're working with that donor, and unbelievable, fabulous. Thank you very much. Is there any more comments? So I'm going to move. Sorry.
I just hope we don't miss something here, like Anton was saying, maybe do we actually come back with this?
I'm going to move now that we've adjourned,
Okay.
and that the staff and we work out redraft a resolution that suits what we've discussed, and then we'll come back with it. I'll move it. Can I have a
Second.
I will read that to him. That the discussion taking place by council to adjourn to allow staff the suggested recommendation. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Hay?
Aye.
Aye. Well, there's a fair okay. We don't need to do that very often. You want a drink? Or a quick? Okay, I'll move now that we've moved back into, we open the meeting back up at 2:08. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Mora, thank you. Thank you to the staff for that piece of work. There. So the recommendation is from Councillor Green, and it is on the screen.
You need glasses, right?
No, I can see long the way, I just can't see.
Okay, sorry, Paul would just like to speak to that first.
Sorry, Madam. We've crafted the resolution effectively in 3 parts. The first part, if you, no, me, sorry.
I'll just go away.
The first part is effectively, we're thanking the sponsorship, so that's that one. Then we're moving into the interested community group, which we've talked first up. So we're discussing it with them. We're asking them to take over the Spring Creek Reserve Fund on the same basis that the council currently operates it, so that our rules will be put into the agreement, so they will have it. Then we go into the, if that doesn't happen because they decline it, then we move into the trust creation, and the same with the Spring Creek Reserve Fund is operated by the trust on the same basis that we are operating it. So that's the $90,000 we're talking about. That would go over with the land and buildings. If we don't get anybody by the 30th of June 2022, whoops, I'm putting lines on there, we're going to close the pool. That's one part of the resolution, so you need to think about that before you go any further. And if we can't get this sorted before the season starts, we are going to have to fund the budget out of, we're taking 15 grand out of the contestable fund and $1,000 out of the members discretionary fund, because we would be short 16,000. So I thought that you might want to have a bit of a chat about that first before we go any further.
Shall we move that and then discuss?
Yep.
Okay, so the recommendation is from Councillor Green.
It's all right. That one, the council thanks the submitters for their submission. Two, council gratefully accepts sponsorship of 40,000 per annum for 5 years and thanks the donor. Three, council staff work with the interested community group to take over the facility, aided by an annual operational grant from the council. Four, council enter into an agreement with the interested community group to take over the Spring Creek Reserve Fund on the same basis that the council is required to operate this fund. Five, if the community group decline the offer, council assists in the formation of a charitable trust and transfer the pool assets and the building to the trust. Six, if the trust is formed, council enter into an agreement with the trust to take over the Spring Creek Reserve Fund on the same basis that the council is required to operate this fund. Seven, if no community group or trust is formed by the 30th of June 2022, council will close the pool. Number 8, should the community group or trust not be operating prior to the opening of the 2021 to 2022 season, then funding to cover the operating shortfall for the 2021 to 2022 season will be made up by reducing the contestable grants fund by 15,000 and reducing the elected members' discretionary fund by 1,000.
Okay, I'll second that. Okay, we'll open it up to the floor for debate. Councillor Becker.
Happy with all 7, I'm not happy with number 8, the contestable fund. That's not fair on the people that write in and apply for money. We're just taking it out there before we gave them a chance at it. We've got to look at alternative funding from my point of view.
I agree with that.
Councillor
Is there any reserve funding left in the Rananga pot?
Only in the infrastructure fund, I think.
How much is in that contestable fund? Is that 20, 25?
No, it's all of the NBS amount of 25,000 is still intact. There was an extra 15,000, so the total was 40,000 that was in the contested fund.
While we're waiting, number 4, through the chair, to give the reserve fund to just a community group, not a legal entity. What's some dangers in there?
Well, the community group we were talking to is the legal entity.
It's the, when we've stated there that it's the interested party.
Yep. So what we're saying,
It's just a group of people at the moment.
no. The one that we are talking to right now
We're putting in there, isn't it?
is a legal entity. If they don't accept it, that's the only community group we'll be dealing with. Where's the legal entity until we create the trust, which then becomes a legal entity.
Councillor Haddock.
From number 8, which I think will sort itself out, is a really good win-win situation for the council and the community in that they get to take over, like we said before, they get to take over their asset. It doesn't close, and I think there's a small chance that it would close because I think the community would get in behind this, or either through community group or trust, and make it work. You know, get longer hours, get what they want, what the community actually want to operate it. So I think number 8 would actually be a non-event, and it's in the hands of the community to actually get in there, get council backing it by giving some funding, and it's got that lump sum of money in there to keep operating. So, and they've got the grant from the donor. So why would the community or a trust not be formed and number 8 even come into action? So I think it's a really good win-win situation here, and here we get given it back to the people to actually make it happen. Council are going to back it.
Just contrary to that, Peter, but if it doesn't happen, we're going to take it out of the contestable funds. So we go with that motion, aren't we?
Catherine?
Yes, 679,000 in the Rananga infrastructure fund.
679,000 structure.
Is that available to be used for that?
I am not 100% sure.
It's only for 1 year, isn't it?
Yes.
1 year only. Councillor McDonald?
Yeah, I'm supporting councillor Becker and that and Haddock, and that it's a win-win for everyone. It's good that it keeps going, but like councillor Becker, I'd like that removed from the contestable grants fund, removed from that 0.8.
Councillor Green?
Yeah, I think I agree with councillor Haddock that it's probably going to sort itself out before we have to use that. That may be at the end of the period, as in the whole financial year. We're looking at, and I think if we look at that figure was to run it for a year. If we actually broke it down and looked at ways we could make it more user-friendly and more, I don't know, economical perhaps, and the way we run it, we might not even have to use that whole amount. That was just what was based on the year before. So I just think it's a safeguard, put in there in place. Michael.
Councillor Haddock?
I don't know if in here, as part of council assisting the community group or the trust, whether we should be offering them there some training through the through our aquatic centre to help, you know, with staff training and that, because obviously it's going to have to be some protocols and how you run the pool and all that sort of stuff. So I thought council would offer that as a free sort of service to get them started as well, because they're going to need, obviously they're going to have their own lifeguards and that type of thing. So I guess would that be an option?
We did
as part of
discuss that with the interested party, that we would support them in those as well through the.
We've made that offer.
So then who is responsible if there's an accident and somebody drowns? Who's held responsible for health and safety? If we are providing lifeguard services, but we don't actually physically run the pool?
Through you, Madam Mayor, we're not actually providing lifeguard services. What we're using is our expertise to help the trust or the organisation to bring their own people up to speed. They will still be responsible, but effectively we would be a free service to them, and we would give them our expertise.
Catherine, did you have an answer for us here?
It has to be on the preference of the people in the area, so it needs to be consulted on to use the infrastructure.
Sorry, through the chair, was there?
No, they did, there was discussion around 10,000 not heavy legislation, but we never actually have a decision.
Could, sorry, through the chair, could possible answer be that in the event that it does end up with that, we still remove the contestable fund, but that funding might come from the $90,000 fund that was being managed.
Through the chair, the condition on the fund is that the principal doesn't be reduced and we only use the interest for subsidising entry into the pool.
So what was the principal?
It's the 90,000.
It was 90.
Through the chair, maybe what we could do is, as we get closer to the time, come back to the council with a requirement for the $15,000 if we need to. From our perspective, having built these budgets, things are very, very tight, and there's not a lot of money in the system, so that hence the stuff that's discretionary is where we kind of initially suggested. But we may know more by the time we get to sort of September, October, when we're getting ready to open this thing, if we haven't gone down and got the someone else involved in the running of it. So that might be an option if you're concerned about the discretionary fund.
So do we
Why don't
change?
we just change the word will to could?
Could, yes, we could do that.
Could be made up, and it's not set in concrete, and it goes into the system like everyone else has got to play by the rules.
I'd agree with that.
Councillor Haddock?
Could we look at changing number 2 to actually have some wording around the assistance the council would give if councillors think that's the right thing towards the training from or assistance from our aquatic centre, you know, from that. So it actually reads that the group take over the facility aided by an annual operation grant from council, maybe and assistance for the first 2 years or something from, in the form of training, the likes from
Council support services.
support services. Would that be acceptable to councillors? Anyone against that?
I'm not against that.
So, the support go just in training, you mean?
Hey, just training, yeah.
Like
yeah.
staff training.
And also
Enable an easy transition.
yeah. So,
Adding
I don't know if
to
council
number-
is happy to change that wording. So, and I guess the other thing I was going to ask about in number 7, if the community group of trust is formed, council will close the pool. Can we have some clarifications?
Say not.
Yes, that one's I don't like the wording of that, will close the pool.
No.
I know,
community. So what would happen to the actual facility? Would the facility then be sold, and the funds would go back to the community? Would that be what would happen?
Council dispose of the asset, return the funds to the community.
You've got to remember where the facility is funded from. It's funded from the general rate. So the community is the grey district itself. Okay,
Right, yeah.
so that it's just because it's in Runanga doesn't mean to say that Runanga, the rest of the district supports it, I guess.
So will that read then that the close the pool and dispose of the asset or something?
What was the other piece, the other GB's benefit? We want that, you wanted to add there, councillor Haddock, to, what was it, number?
What about to focus in on? It was on number 2, Debbie, where it was, sorry, number 3, yeah, aided by an operational grant from council and staff support. Is it,
Assistance to enable an easy transition.
yeah.
Okay, are there any more comments? Councillor Moore?
I'm not comfortable with number 7 at all. We're going to get 40,000 from a donor, it costs us 60,000. We're only looking at another 20,000 to keep that asset in the community. And we've seen the passion of the community for this, and we're wanting for just $20,000. If we can't get these groups, we're just going to take it away. To be honest, I don't agree with that.
I agree with you.
Bring it back to council.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Decision
agree
will
with you.
come back to council.
Yeah,
Why not close, we revisit it or something?
yeah.
It's too good of an asset to dispose of, the words are quite
We're not
harsh.
wanting to take things away from this, the whole thrust of this. And yes, we've got a wonderful way of being able to keep it going. But if we can't do that, I think we should still be providing it.
Yeah, definitely, I think so.
We don't make it too easy without. I'll get the other opportunities to work, it's all.
I would take,
If no council group or trust is formed by 30 June 2022, council will revisit.
Otherwise,
I think the whole idea of this is we've actually decided that the Spring Peak pool should go into the community to run, and so we're going to be a bit. I know we don't want to close it, but we're actually saying to the community here, take ownership of it. We will support you. We've got a donor that's actually going to support as well. So I'd hate to think that it actually falls back to the council that this, look, it's all bits we think it's too hard, and then the council. So we're either making one decision or not. We're actually saying that here we are, here's a sum of money. We are going to fund a certain amount, but we don't want to, as council, operate it. So we're up to a community or trust, and I believe that's how it should go. It should be either in one of those two forms. And if the trust involves being a couple of councillors, well, we've got to make it work. It's one of those. It's no different than some of our outer pools in the community, and we're not saying we're closing it. We just want to make sure it goes and run by the community. That's the way I see it.
You're making it very easy for them to step in and do this.
Yeah.
How easy, you can't get any easier.
I think that wording was very harsh for dispose of the asset when there is the money there from the donor. I think it's a little bit harsh because there is definitely hope.
Can I just make a comment? Sorry. If you're going to make the decision after the 30th of June 2022, just bear in mind it's actually after we've already done our budget for that year.
Yeah.
So just need to take that into consideration.
What date?
Number 7.
Yeah, I guess we could say that it would need to be included in an annual plan process. And maybe what you could say then, if you wanted to, you could say, because we've secured the donation, that we, as a fallback position, although I understand where you're coming from, councillor, potentially making the backstop, i.e. we'll continue with it, more attractive than what we actually want to do, which is pass it on to the community. Maybe we could say that this will be for the period of the sponsorship.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that.
And then if we haven't solved the problem, then that's the point. Because if nobody's interested, that would be really disappointing, I guess, if nobody was interested in taking over this with the sort of offer that's being made here. So, I mean, we've gone through the process of asking the ratepayers of what they want. If we give them sort of the period of the sponsorship to take this opportunity, and I think Councillor Green, you said it was a great opportunity. I'm actually expecting that to actually be redundant, because I think you're right. I think they will take it and they will run with it. But I think that might be a little bit of a, hang on guys, if we don't, this is potentially what's going to happen. Let's do it. I guess that's where we're on.
I think they know that anyway. They thought that's what was coming.
Councillor McBride was wanting to speak.
Yeah, I'll just follow on from that. Paul sort of summed it up then, but this is a hell of a gesture. And I'd be surprised if they don't hit the ground running with it. And the other areas like Blackbourne and Harrow, they'll be looking at this with envy, because if they can't get this going, there's something wrong with it. Because this is a hell of a gift.
Councillor Green.
No, you go first.
Yeah, I just think that because yesterday in the submission phase, no one knew this information. So, you know, had they known that, they would have grabbed it by open arms like we're all doing. So, you know, we're probably in an unfortunate position as we know what is going to happen, and you know, it's really lucky. So I think possibly just having that safeguard, you've got to have that in the contract, you know, just in case you just don't know what's going to happen. But I don't think it's going to happen. They'll take it.
We could get another COVID.
Councillor McDonald.
Why don't we, in 7, instead of saying we'll revisit the situation, just go to part 3 of the original and say if the community is not formed, if the community group or trust is not formed, council will proceed with divesting from the operation after the effect of whatever date the sponsorship comes out.
That's the one.
Yeah, that sounds like proceed with divesting in the operation in sponsorship.
Leave it as revisit the situation. It leaves us with both of those options, doesn't it? Because otherwise we're saying, you know, we're going to spend $14 million on a library, 20,000 for a small community. I mean, I would just leave it as revisit, and that way our options are open both ways.
We're not trying to spend it whatever it is.
Just for Debbie's clarity, because poor Debbie's trying to keep up with us.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, but we've got a clear period of time, 5 years sponsorship, then we can revisit at that point.
I think Councillor McDonald's suggestion was quite a good one. Can you reword that?
Oh. Just on there,
Sorry, Tim, did I cut you off?
we'll divest from the operation of Spring Creek Pool after the sponsorship.
After the sponsorship period closes. Yeah. I'd be happy to move an amendment to that. You know?
Yeah, I'm happy with that one. Yep.
So that'll be for the period of
This will be tied out 3 months.
Oh, yeah.
I'll just change that.
I would say, yeah.
But it's just going to take it forward.
Sorry, Councillor Moore, did I cut you off?
Running.
Sorry, Councillor Moore, did I cut you off before? Or did you have something else to
No,
say?
no.
Oh, sorry. I would like to add something to that, and I don't want to be painful, but I would just like to add that we encourage the Runanga community to take this opportunity to keep their fabulous, you know, their facility and to increase the patronage. Is that
They got
okay?
make it work.
I would encourage the Runanga community to embrace this opportunity and make use of their fabulous facility or something along those lines, because we want people to use it. We want them to rise up and to actually utilise it, because that is why this has become an issue in the first place. Please embrace your facilities and utilise them to make them viable. So
I think number 7 needs to be not for the period of sponsorship. I think it should say after the period of sponsorship. If the community or trust is not formed, the council will divest from the operation. It's not for the period, it's actually after the period.
Good point.
I mean, because the sponsor may actually then say, I'll roll it over for a further period.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah, that's good.
we could move that change.
any more comments there? Shall we get councillor Green to reread the very much revised amendment? If you don't mind, just to clarify. And
So start at start?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So number 1, council thanks the submitters for their submission. Number 2, council gratefully accepts sponsorship of 40,000 per annum for 5 years and thanks the donor. Number 3, council staff work with the interested community group to take over the facility, aided by an annual operational grant from council and staff assistance to enable an easier transition. Number 4, council enter into an agreement with the interested community group, which is a legal entity, to take over the Spring Creek Reserve Fund on the same basis that the council is required to operate this fund. Number 5, if the community group decline the offer, council assists the formation of a charitable trust and transfer the pool assets and the building to the trust. Number 6, if the trust is formed, council enter into an agreement with the trust to take over the Spring Creek Reserve Fund on the same basis that the council is required to operate this fund. Number 7, after the period of the sponsorship, if the community group or trust is not formed, council will divest from the operation of Spring Creek Pool. Number 8, should the community group or trust not be operating prior to the opening of the 2021-2022 season, then funding to cover the operating shortfall for the 2021-2022 season could be made up by reducing the contestable grants fund by $15,000 and reducing the elected members' discretionary fund by $1,000. Number 9, council encourage the Runanga community to embrace this opportunity and make use of this wonderful facility.
Sorry.
I will second that.
Just scroll back down.
Right down, yep.
I will second it, and then councillor Becker, then you can go into discussion.
A bit more, yeah, like just there, number 3, council staff work with the interested community group to take over the facility, aided by a yearly donation and an annual operational grant from council. We have included that.
We may not be making the donation, it may be made directly to the
Okay, so that's why you took it out. Okay, sorry.
Okay, any more comments?
Mine was with regard to number 7. I just wonder whether we needed to change formed to operating. In the unlikely event that there isn't a trust or a group formed and then it's failed. Hopefully that's not the case, but I just wonder whether we need to just cover ourselves at that point.
The trust is not operating.
Yeah.
Operational.
Operational now?
Operational.
It's better.
Yep. It could be from not working.
Yeah, that's right.
Any more comments? All those in favour, please raise your hands. Against? Motion carried. Yay! Right, here we've got part 1. Getting to key issue 4 on page 33. I'll move that report be received. Can I have a second, please? Councillor Haynes. All those in favour? Runanga Service Centre is a different issue than the Spring Creek Pool. The building required a lot requiring expense to upgrade, and it has had low patronage and is a service that none of our other towns and suburbs have. It is though something the Runanga people have had in their community for a very long time, and the concerns have certainly been heard. None of these decisions are easy to make, and we do thank you again for all of the submissions. With the submissions yesterday, there's been some very positive conversations and suggestions around with council working and with the community and keeping some of these services happening. And I have met with some members that we had heard and other members of the community that have got some very good ideas and positive ideas, and council staff are certainly willing to work with them depending what decisions made. I'd also make to put forward that if we do decide to dispose of the Runanga Service Centre, that the money goes into the playground or something else in Runanga that contributes. It has to go into the community. So I'll open it up. Councillor McBride.
Yeah, once again, yesterday we had some very passionate people. It was great to see Runanga certainly coming out in the numbers for these sorts of things. One of the ideas from a couple of the people there was about having the centre sort of gifted to a community group again. The issue around that is obviously the condition of the building and how much it would cost for us. It's a bit of a liability for us to be going and repairing it and then gifting it on. So I like the idea of what you said, Mia, with regards to if we dispose of it, that the money remains in Runanga, so it's not a complete end for them, that can go towards something else. The other thing, with the services changing so much, we've got to sort of move with the times, but I'm very interested to see when the miners hall goes ahead, if we could somehow incorporate a sort of a satellite setup of the library out there, just to utilise their space a bit more and help them with what foot traffic was coming in. I think it would be used a lot more in that location. And that's about it.
So great. Sorry, Councillor Becker.
Yeah, I'm quite happy. Basically, what's been said, I don't want all the money to go into out there. It's just a percentage of the funds to go into maybe a playground upgrade. That's been paid by the greatest residents, not just the people of Runanga, that maintenance on the running of that building.
Yeah, well, the last thing I want is the place sold, and if that was to be the case, then I, agree. And originally it would have been bought and paid for by Runanga residents. So to go back there, but my feeling is that maybe we could look at perhaps running it on a reduced basis for maybe even a couple of years until the miners hall is up and running, maybe in conjunction with the mail delivery, like on a 3-day basis, even a 2-day, have the library running at the same time and have the service centre running, and so everyone knows exactly when it's open and what its function is for, and then maybe revisit it in a couple of years.
Councillor McBride.
I do get what Councillor Becker was saying with regards to its the Greymouth ratepayer, but in saying that, I believe that even though we in town are helping fund it, I feel that it's definitely a Runanga entity where we, as a council previously, they had their own borough, so I'm sure that was negotiated and somehow that they got to retain that. So I feel that that money should actually still remain in that small community, but I do get what Councillor Beck is saying. I would also like a bit of clarity about that situation or how it came about with the borough closing. If anyone here knows, I don't know the details of how it got to remain out there. But I believe it was some sort of negotiation formed with when the amalgamation happened. Does anyone know the history of the building?
You need same as Brunners. So you're going to give them back the money for their assets, the council took as well, or we're trying things up.
Interesting point.
Now we're probably the only one that would come back here. Sorry, now. Well,
Sorry, through the chair and CEO, I wasn't privy to any of those sort of discussions.
No, just recalling the history, but
I guess that was potentially a political decision at the time. There would be, I wouldn't suggest there would be any other reason for it than political reason. I guess the other issue that we need to talk about is the potential bill to fix it up. And then we've got some numbers with regards to that.
Just through the chair and the CEO, we did have it in the C list in the 2018-19 year, and around about $43,000 to replace the roof and do refurbishment work on it. So in today's terms, it's probably maybe around $65,000–70,000 now for significant increases the last 2 years construction costs.
You say roofing, is it actually earthquake prone to that?
That includes that. The strengthening work to improve its seismic capacity is relatively minor, and it involves replacing some of the internal walls with plywood to make them stronger, and then wood paint them, of course. But yes, that's relatively
The
low cost
other thing
figures.
is it's not earthquake prone because of the construction, it's timber frame block near, so it's not on the earthquake prone.
We have a value of the asset, like what is it actually worth, market?
Around 50.
79 all up, I think the building's 60,000.
Councillor Green and then Councillor Gibson.
Yeah, just want to reiterate the fact that that there is no other service. There's no bus service, there's no public transport. There's a lot of old people that live out there to get into town, and my worry is, what are we going to do if we do shut it? What's their alternative? Are we just going to say tough luck, get to town or get a taxi? What is the alternative? What are we going to do? Can we offer them some little assistance, or are we just going to say no, see you later?
If I may, Madam Mayor, we've been thinking about that as a management team, and some of the things that we thought we might be doing is around, for start, the post office, if we're talking about post office, that can go in, so that can stay in the town. It doesn't have to be us that runs it. It can be anyone else can run it. From the point of view of the services that we provide, we talked about going out there at rates time and sending a team of people out at dog registration time, rubbish bag ties time, that type of thing, and until the miners' hall gets up and running, so we can provide a bit of a service for those types of things, and even down to the library, we may be able to do some sort of even if it's here's order the books and we'll bring them out to you type of thing at a weekly or however often basis. So there are things that we can do. We haven't really thought how that might evolve, but we have got them on our minds.
That's what the community group that met with us with the submissions, so that some of their suggestions and ideas and of drop-offs of where that point may be and how they could work and actually find a space. And there were a few spaces that they need to approach, but as they said, until they had got more clarification of what was happening, they haven't done too much work around that, but there are certain places where they've discussed they could go. Sorry, Gibson was.
Oh, I think Renee was getting a bit of a hot one at the moment, and they feel like they're losing everything. There's no way we can defer it for a year and see what they can actually come up with to sort of make things better for themselves. Is that possible, or we've got the budget? Or?
Well, we have set the budget based on the preferred option that you guys went out with.
Yeah.
So that's how we prepared the budget. So if you want to do anything different, we're changing the budget, and which means, and every time I mention budget, all the hands go up. Did you notice that?
Trying to keep track of you.
So every time, we've set our budget, and our financial strategy has rates rises listed in there. If we change that, we're going to breach our rates rise caps. So we have to think of another way.
Councillor Moore.
Just to say around transportation, I'm pretty sure the Runanga Weekends Club run a weekly shuttle into town. You've also got community alternative resources for the elderly, which is a group of volunteers that provides transportation for people to go into doctor's appointments and shopping. And also the St John's, that yellow bus they've got, that also works for some of the health. So there are some things that they would have moved people.
Yeah, I know that, because was it me?
I don't know if Pete's
You're up.
asking.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry, yeah, I know that, because I started one of the Workmen's Club,
Yeah.
but, and they have to become a member of the club, it's not just a
Right.
anybody. But anyway, that's fine. The other thing, what I wanted to ask though, is the staffing. So, the staff member there, will she continue to be employed here?
That's a staffing issue, and I'm not prepared to talk about that in
No.
an open meeting.
Yeah,
So
because I mean, that concerns me that someone may lose their job, or is she going to be retained here? Or, you know, because if she is, then her wages would have been allowed for in the budget. That's where I'm going down that track.
yeah,
So I mean,
we're
that's not
talking,
going to be,
yeah, we're talking the marginal cost of,
Yeah.
and it's in the consultation document, we're talking $16,000.
It is excluding stuff.
But yes, so.
Yeah.
But what we're actually then talking about is future $65,000 roof upgrade and the like, so.
Councillor Wade?
Yeah, I think that's right, Paul. I think I agree with that. But looking at it from our perspective, if we were to defer it for a year, as was suggested by Councillor Gibson and Councillor Green, we then have to do those earthquake strengthening and repair work to house the staff in there safely. So that becomes our responsibility to monitor their safety, and we're obliged to do those repairs, I think. Just a question, if I can, through the chair to Diane, do we have difficulty? We own or run 2 lots of pensioner housing flats in Runga. Do we have trouble leasing those flats?
No, they're pretty much full.
Because what will happen if we take away that service for the elderly who haven't got access to drive to town? Will that make those flats less viable? Are we actually digging a hole that they might fall into?
I think from other communities like Dobson are in the same position, you know, and they find a way. There's 60 plus on the waiting list. There are options, as we discussed before, of people. Yeah, so and those ones are still track the same, don't they, Johnson? Like they're all full.
I have a friend who, well, I had a friend maybe 10 or 12 years ago who sold their house in town and moved out to pensioner flat in Dobson because they thought that was a cheaper option for them, suited at the time. He subsequently lost his license for drink driving and he was stuck out there. and suddenly Dobson wasn't an attractive option anymore because he couldn't drive into town. So, I mean, and those people out there are stuck with no wheels, no transport options, no public transport, no car, and we're taking away the service.
Hey, did you have something to say before, or were you just?
Yep, no.
Sorry.
Hey, look, I think as council, we're in a really tricky situation, and none of us like being here taking away potentially a facility from a community. But the realism is what's actually happened is, you know, time's caught up with us. I remember, as you're all well, that the post office in town was the most busiest place in town. It was the icon of every town. What's happened to all the post offices in every community? They've all closed because time's caught up with us. The Greymouth post office was the busiest place in Greymouth. You know, now there's no post office in the centre of Greymouth. It's an agency. So I do, and you know, technology and time's caught up. Now you can't bank a cheque, so the people can't go down to pay their cheque. And even if they do go down to pay their rates with the cheque, they're not, council aren't going to be accepted. So they're going to have to do it online. I know it's difficult for elderly people, but there is assistance in the community. And unfortunately, it's just one of those centres, and it's a cost-saving measure. It's been the lack of support. I know Councillor Green, you go on there daily to keep the number up. The support has dropped off. I think it's really important. A lot of the submitters said that we need to support the library, and I think we need to find an alternative for that. And I'm hoping that within a short period that the the miners' hall can get up and running, and that will be the community hub there, and the library and those facilities can run from there. As far as, the post-middle age, that could go to a shop or some other, I don't know that the club's the right place, I don't know, but this is the realism of what's happened in small communities, and that there used to be a train station at every block along the way. I know there used to be one at Coro, there used to be one at South Beach, all the way down the line. But now there's no train services the same. Public transport's taken over. If taxis used to have all the stands in the middle of the Greymouth now, there's none of those because public people have got their own vehicles. So somehow the community's got to help, and I appreciate the comments the CEO made about council looking at going to the community at times where they have to at the right times and until the transition goes through to the miners all taken over. At the end of the day, why are we actually looking at this? Why are we even got this matter on the agenda? The reason we got it on the agenda, it's not being used enough, and time is caught up, and there's probably going to be less uses now with the event of checks not being accepted. So it's a difficult decision for council to make, but that's what we have to do, unfortunately. So I would like to think that somehow we find a way to transition the library to another place. But the big thing of it's not just the running cost of $22,000 a year, it's the potential risk and liability the council is going to face with the earthquake, with the re-roofing and the maintenance of the building. It's a building that's going to come up for more maintenance. So all of a sudden we're going to have to find more money. And you look at the rate burden. It was $40 a head if it went to Rananga, and that's not palatable. It's not acceptable for those people to have that on their rates. So not a small declaration of interest this one.
I must say, well, they did ask Rananga to rise up the community about 8 months ago, and the numbers didn't improve. But we also have this group of enthusiastic people that are ready to go, and where they have been working with council, and council have ideas with them. So we don't want to even lose them as well at the time. But Councillor Becker.
Well, I'm a bit more blunt on it. I don't think it's viable with any option to keep it open. Like there's other small towns up the valley. Blackpool would love to have a service centre. We'd like one up at O'Hara, so would Moana, Dobson. The reality is we can't provide service centres in small towns. But they've got the same transport problems in all the small towns.
Yep.
There's people that haven't got cars. Regarding to the transport from Rananga, I know the Blackpool shuttle goes past every day. I'm sure they'd like a bit more utilisation of their shuttle and the work in the trip into town for people.
Councillor McDonald.
I just wonder whether there's some other alternatives being looked at as far as an accommodation for it. I'm fully behind actually shutting it and divesting ourselves of that building, but I just wonder whether some of the proceeds could be used to keep it open in a lesser form in another area. So that could maybe fund that. And another accommodation. And the other thing was maybe an option would be with the school. I know we bouncing off them with the pool, but maybe to turn their library into a community library. I know some schools that have actually brought in the public and looked at it. Depends on what sort of system they run, but that would be a perfectly viable way to continue to have the library there. And the other thing was, if it did proceed to closing the service, the council gives an assurance that staff, maybe in conjunction with WINS people, were to go around all of these people to help them set up, whether it be direct debits or online banking, that sort of thing, so that they could progress past the check thing. I mean, that would be a service that we could offer to the people at home.
When I met with the community group, did have the discussions about the library. The school haven't been in any of those discussions, but they did discuss it as a bit of a security issue for the school and for the young people, like people going in and out. But Councillor Moore.
I like what you're saying, that you've had discussion with staff about maybe mobile around rates. I'm wondering if it's actually worth putting that in motion as a clause, to the effect that council will explore or investigate going out at rates times. So that sends a positive message until that transition period
I think that's a good idea. I think adding that to the motion and also adding that the money from the service centre goes back into the Runanga community for like the playground or a asset to be upgraded that is deteriorated.
Because we're looking at that, with that meeting out there to look at that playground area.
There's so many assets in so many of our small towns. Runanga is one that have been run down and need to be upgraded. Instead of creating new assets, we need to work on many that we have, and the future again of the children that are growing up in Runanga and what they have. They'll have a pool, a playground, thoughts.
Worship, will that add to our maintenance budget?
The playground's already existing.
It's already out, we should be looking at that.
Like if we upgrade to a far bigger size, safety inspections, that sort of thing.
Well, we should be inspecting it anyway, and I would expect new equipment would have less maintenance on it.
And I'm not suggesting it's to extend it. It's what is there, it needs upgrading and it desperately needs it. And it's certainly, as Paul says, it will require less and we already do it, but it's just so degraded now, bringing it up to a good standard for the community.
Scroll it up for us.
I just think, just to comment with Councillor McBride, it's wrong names here.
Similar, yes.
I'm sorry, I just got my name, but anyway, I don't think it's a council, it's a council service to actually go and help people with their new banking and that. I think there's plenty of other community groups that will pick that up, and I think that's more of a community support groups that will help people in need for that. And I think it's
my thinking there was purely if it did proceed to that, to make it more palatable.
Do we need to add on that number for back into the community of Runanga on a council owned asset? Yeah, no, sorry, I'm just asking.
We're both mixed.
Councillor Moore, sorry.
So number 3, council investigate options around running mobile, what's the word for it? Mobile office or something for ratepayers around rates times.
mobile service.
Mobile services for rates payment. But I think time limited
That's right.
for the next 2 years or
Until
something
the
like that.
Runanga
Yeah.
mine is full.
Yeah. Well,
I think that needs a bit more clarity in there too. We don't want to be.
Just the next 2 years.
Yeah, I'd say 2 years.
So the regional district, like,
Yeah, we're going to kick up from the river, another little town on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have that out of
Yes, just
place.
for 2 years.
Moana,
I think it needs more clarity around that too, because it's sort of like a mobile service. We don't really run around on a weekly basis. So I would have thought if it was only on one day, that the rates, prior to the rates getting durabilised, I don't think you want to be
Well, I guess
pretty.
there's things that we need to consider, that the dog registration, if that's applicable, rates, so that's quarterly rates rebates, which is usually, but mostly happens, at the beginning of but they do dribble in through the year. And rubbish title, or having said that, we're going to put wheelie bins in, so they will be gone.
Yeah.
So we'll have those for next year, because we're not. So those, maybe those milestone type times is when we could be looking at that.
Should we be going with running mobile services? Wouldn't we be better to just say that we investigate options of educating the community of how to sort of transition away from it rather than
honestly,
Fine,
think if
myself.
it's a mobile services in every one of the district.
that's what I mean, yeah. So maybe we just educate them
District.
how to transition
It's
this.
only for 2 years, and it would be seen as a transition from moving a service centre to going to nothing. So this is like a transition period between those two options, where we had a service centre, you're not going to have anything. So for 2 years, we're helping you through that. So it's not like we're adding in mobile services all around the district. We're just transitioning them away from the service centre.
Just the way people read it.
Just one small point though, is that mine's all going to be ready in 2 years.
But that's why I didn't say mine at all. No matter what happens after 2 years.
Councillor
Can
McDonald.
I ask Rose, do you think that the community needs that centre, what's the most important part of that centre? I mean, in a number of the submissions were a place to go, a place to meet. What I took out of it was more people wanted that rather than actually the bill paying services. And I thought,
Social
I
interaction.
might be being devil's advocate, but I thought maybe that was, the bill paying was maybe an excuse for what was less important than the place to meet. Do you find that or not? What do you
I
think?
think it's just the option of having it there, so that the ones that want to use it aren't reliant on someone else. They can go down there and talk to Tracy and see other people, because there's always people popping in and out, you know, for different things. I know that stats might not show it because I don't know what Tracy records, whether she records people that come in for a chat or whether she records people that just, you know, come in to do a service. So I think that's the whole, just the fact that they're going to take it away, they'll be suddenly like, what have we got? Where are we going to go? What are we going to do? And I
So
think,
from what
yeah,
you're saying there, it's more the community thing rather than the.
Yeah, yeah, and for those older people that haven't got transport to do their, you know, to pay their bills and to all, you know, post their letters and send their parcels. Yeah.
They can find another alternative site to have their chat, a coffee or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Paul,
Well, wherever the postal agency goes, is where, you know, the parcels and the letter stuff, and that's possibly where people start congregating.
I think maybe number 3, like, isn't it, when a council work, well, that's where we are down there, council staff work with interested parties to enable them to run their own community library. Can it not be, you know, that number 3 added into that somehow? Council work with the community group as to what facilities and to help transition them through this period.
and that's library, but we did an option, your worship.
Yeah.
Going around and around in a circle, we need to, council staff work with any interested parties to enable them to help to transition and retain their and options to help them retain their services
Yeah,
and other.
that's it.
Are we not bogging down our staff again here though? Like this is going to cost money. Like we've got council staff on option 3, council staff on option 5.
We're going to take 3 out.
Away?
We're talking about taking number 3 out altogether.
Yeah.
And I think that's fair. There is a transitional period here, so I think it's small cost for council to work in with these people, and it's also, you know, council staff and councillors or whatever working with you know, I mean, no doubt the council board, Rose will be working with those people through the council staff and that to try and find alternatives.
Who are the interested parties?
So we'll be top of pop.
I think Councillor McBride used the right word before, educate, or was that Councillor McDonald?
No, mate, I'm not even.
We need to stop going around in a circle, and we need to clarify this, Debbie, because we're just going around and around in a circle. So I think we need to take number 3 out. Council staff work with any interested parties to enable them to transition and help them to run community initiatives and their own community library. And look at options for the postal service, including their own community library. And options for their postal service.
Run the postal service, you know.
Sorry, there's no option to give them the building to have on your own.
Cost too much.
Well, I think we're lumbering them with a problem that we have, Tim, and I don't know if any small community group will have the ability.
Yeah.
I mean, we're trying to create a trust.
Yeah, I
We're
just
trying
think there's
to,
no option.
yeah, I think we need to actually. So number 3 is going, Councillor McBride, is you?
I just, on that number 4, I don't know whether just being political here, but I don't know whether we should be saying, it's like we're saying we're going to help them with their own community library, maybe just the possibility of, so we're not tying ourselves. So if we can't find the right people to do it, then to hell with it.
Yeah.
You know, like
Make
you
it
can't,
positive.
yeah, you can't just keep knocking on doors and saying, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? So be a bit more to the point. So council staff work with any interested parties to enable them to transition and help them run community initiatives and the possibility of their own community library.
Yes.
So we're just saying, that we can also offer you this, but if there's no take up on it, then done with.
Sorry, I just want to add, again, people weren't privy to this yesterday, submitters.
Oh, they'll be
So-
privy to it
So,
tomorrow.
yeah, they're gonna,
Yeah.
whatever. And, so what I'm saying is, that they were keen without the information. So once they get the information.
Yep.
Yeah, prepare to, so it's very similar to.
Yeah, it'll happen, but yeah, just in case it doesn't.
Can you explain for me how number 5 would work? How will that work out?
As we did discuss before, the staff have already been working with the groups, they've already come up with ideas, and those groups are ready to stand up and to actually start talking, but they didn't want to talk to the people with the buildings until they had clarity around the council of what decisions were being made. So those groups are ready to go, and council staff and I have been working with them, and they're eager and sorted. So I don't know exactly how it would work. I guess those discussions need to come into play.
Have they got their own building lined up?
They have talked about many options, and they've talked about 3 different options in the community, but they just have not approached them yet until we have some decisions.
Sorry, just one, just a query, is there another Plunkett room, oh, the old Plunkett rooms, is somebody in there or someone taking that over?
Yes, Debbie's, it actually has been leased.
Oh, it has, okay, yeah, thanks.
So there are 3 other buildings, as I say, that they've suggested that may work well.
Right, shall we roll on with this one?
Righty ho, and the recommendation is from councillor McBride.
So 1, council thanks the submitters for their submission. 2, council confirms its intention to close Rananga Service Centre Community Library effective from 1 July 2021, or as close as practical once appropriate arrangements have been made. 3, council approves the proceeds of the sale of the service centre to be put back into Rananga council-owned assets. 4, council staff work with any interested parties to enable them to transition and help them to run community initiatives, the possibility of their own community library, and look at options for the postal service.
I have a seconder, please.
I would have to second that motion.
Councillor Haddett, all those in favour, please raise your hand. Yep. Okay, against, and councillor Green and councillor Gibson both want your vote recorded. Thank you. Motion carried. So we are adjourning now for half an hour. I'll move that we adjourn the meeting now. Second, thank you, councillor Becker.
So can I just, stop, sorry,
Thank you.
can I just stop?